Would you kindly bear with me on this video? This is about what recently happened with Helldivers. If you didn't know, a challenge was issued to the developers by a guy on Reddit who basically offered $1,000 to a charity of choice if the developers could actually play their game at the highest level, basically challenging the devs to play their own balance at difficulty 10. What was the result of that? The guy got doxxed, and also allegedly, I'm not entirely sure of that, some of the charities that were named, possibly as some of the charities that would have been donated to, were being called by the same or some of those psychos within the Helldivers community. And due to this incident, the challenge was obviously cancelled and the guy immediately removed himself from the community, and I'm pretty sure he is not going to do anything in the Helldivers community anymore. That guy is done. I mean, understandable. Now, due to this incident, I thought back and thought about some of the stuff that the devs did in the past. Basically how Arrowhead conducts themselves, what Pilestead himself has said in some of his interviews, and also the type of LARPing that the game encourages you to emulate. You know, the entire Helldivers LARP that the community is doing. Again, this is more of a off-the-cuff video. I didn't actually read any studies on this, but I'm sure behavior like this has probably been studied, and there is probably interesting scientific material that you can find on, how internet cults or online social media cults form around video games. That's an idea maybe for another long-form video at some point in time. But again, this is just loosely scripted, my thoughts about this, because this came across my desk, so to say, because I still watch certain, or at least I watch like one single Helldivers creator after leaving the community. I still watch Odo relatively often, and he talked about this recently, so I came across that issue. Now, my personal thoughts, if you look at the Helldivers community as a whole, you get this supposedly very tight-knit community. It's like a brotherhood almost, which makes sense considering the game. Everyone is LARPing and playing into the Super Earth thing, democracy officer reporting you, super democracy fantasy, Super Earth, stuff like this. It's an interesting roleplay aspect, I guess. Basically, it's an offshoot of Starship Troopers and what those books and movies basically entailed, or like a part of that philosophy. Now, of course, if you look into the material that Helldivers is based on, aka the book, it goes much deeper than just big patriotism or I'm doing my part or killing alien bugs. There's much more intricate things there, but that's not entirely the point of the video. It makes no sense to go like really deep into the topic for the purposes of what I'm about to talk about. I'm more aiming at the entire vibes aspect of the community, the LARPing within the Helldivers community. Now, in order to put this into perspective, Pilestead had a very famous interview a while back where he did a bit of an oopsie and basically said something along the lines of, we tricked you guys into pretending to be a bunch of space Nazis. It's not a specific quote that he said, so something like that. Don't directly quote me on that. He said something to the point of, we wanted to see if we could trick a community into playing as the bad guys. So Helldivers are the bad guys, judging by Pilestead's logic, whether that's the World War II bad guys or just basically the fascism trope, whatever you want to put it, like Starship Troopers, Stormtroopers, whatever you want to put in there. Pretty basic stuff. What does matter is that the developers almost, or at least almost all of the developers in the community and the community facing members, including like some of the moderators at Arrowhead, heavily lean into the LARPing aspect, like the fantasy aspect of the video game. And it makes sense, you want to play into your community a little bit. They're partly even encouraging some of the activism type of action that the community took sometimes, which I don't actually dislike. I think the whole stink that was made over the PSN account requirement and some of the at least passive condoning that Arrowhead did, players voting and voting the game into oblivion with the negative review bombing that happened, and making a huge fuss about this issue. Basically, the Steam voting, the Steam rating goes down every time something really, really controversial happens. The community likes to speak out, and I think this is, at least by some of the Arrowhead developers, was encouraged. Maybe not now at this point in time, but in the past, there definitely was support for the PSN account counter movement. So this is in theory a good thing, but that's not entirely how this whole thing developed. While the developers did support some of that community pro-player action, most of the time the developers were kind of entirely full of themselves and mostly talking down to the community in a very condescending manner. One YouTuber put it pretty aptly, I forgot who it was at the time, it might have been Tanner Lindbergh or someone else, but anyway, they showed basically a picture of the like stereotypical fat Redditor guy and then basically said, this is what you need to imagine every time one of the Arrowhead devs talks about anything, or at least how they talk. You probably should imagine the image of the stereotypical Reddit guy that knows everything and he knows stuff more and better than you and you don't know anything, and so you should pipe down and listen. And so the Helldivers community is LARPing as space Nazis, while the developers condescendingly berate and finger wag to the community, while also encouraging and enabling the fantasy LARP at every opportunity as long as it plays into their ballpark, as long as it paints the game or the studio in a cool light. At least on Reddit or Discord, like the threads or comments. If there is like a announcement that a developer makes and then somebody makes a Helldivers related joke that's in support, obviously, of what they're doing, then it's going to be highlighted. You know, they're very actively playing into the fantasy of Helldivers, especially if it's time for a patch and we all, you know, we need to get ready to shit our pants of what's going to happen or whatever. You know, it's some sort of joke or about a corrections officer watching you over the shoulder or some Helldiver shooting another Helldiver. I mean, the entire Helldivers salute is like a thing that, you know, it's definitely highlighting the LARP aspect of the community with a lot of the posts that the devs are making. Whether that's intentional or unintentional, don't really know. I think for the developers, partly it's intentional, but I think they were not really ready for what that would do to the community in the long run. So as long as it is beneficial to the image of the studio, that space Nazi LARP is supported, encouraged, and enabled, even though Pilestead clearly said, you know, we're supposed to be the bad guys. You know, you play your favorite co-op space shooter and all of a sudden, there it is. You're a Nazi. You didn't ask for this. You didn't want it. Okay, I'm gonna stop. I'm gonna stop making fun of extra credits now. Rest in piss, extra credits. That's all I'm gonna say. Anyway, moving on. In the end, you end up with what I hope is the final form of this indoctrination, which we all know, like the indoctrination as in the like full-on Arrowhead defenders, the positive divers, you know, the guy that probably hangs out on low-sodium Helldivers all day, those types of players, you know, the insane part of the community. And that's very important to note. I think, and it's very evident, these players make up the minority of the community, but it's a very loud and annoying part of that community. And maybe one of the reasons why I don't really engage with the game anymore. It's not really the main reason. I mean, a lot of gaming spaces or a lot of gaming communities are annoying as shit, but you can easily ignore that. My reason for leaving Helldivers was more down the lines of the game really doesn't have the staying power that people proclaim it to have. It just got a little bit boring due to how the missions are designed, but that's besides the point. I didn't leave because of the community. That's what I wanted to line out. Yeah. But those types of people within the community actually going so far as to resorting to doxing a random guy over a simple challenge for a charity, no less. Keep that in mind. That dude was doxed because he genuinely issued a fun, well-meant challenge to the community, and as thanks for that, certain members, certain minorities within the community doxed him and possibly also contacted the charities, which is not evident, at least as far as I see. Now, how does stuff like this happen? And this is where my insane schizo theory comes into effect. Again, there might actually be some sort of scientific evidence behind this. I didn't read any sort of research paper for this video. I didn't prepare anything. This is just off the cuff, immediate opinions, and just my idea what might have happened. You know, in theory, Helldivers shouldn't be such a cesspit. Think about it. It's a fairly approachable PvE game, a co-op game, supposed to kind of support each other in the game. You should work as a team. It has the whole kind of community aspect of we're all fighting for Super Earth. I would expect a community is such a negative, bad community behavior from an extremely competitive game, maybe even a game that encourages griefing behavior. By the very design, how the game is designed, it encourages griefing. Like something maybe like Rust players or some really hardcore extraction shooter. I would expect those people to act that way. Expected. I would expect them. It's not actually that all of these people do act out. I would just expect communities that are more competitive to be a little bit more spicy. And then maybe communities that attract certain people. I forgot what it was. Was it the Steven Universe community that bullied some artist into like a self-deletion attempt because they drew a character as not fat? I mean, you know what I mean though. This is the case in many online communities, whether it's fan bases of a video game, a show, or whatever. It's spaces that attract neurodivergent crowds of people. I don't know how to put it in any other way or shape or form. But you wouldn't expect these types in Helldivers, or at least not from the setup of the game. Well, apparently the Discord is pretty bad, and if there's like that type of degeneracy on the Discord of the Helldivers community, then yeah, it probably does attract weirdos, even though it's a pretty normal co-op shooter, third-person co-op shooter. It's like, you don't expect that crowd to be, although, yeah, I mean, furries are everywhere nowadays, so I don't know. Anyway, I'm not very interested in seeing that shit on the Helldivers Discord. It's not the place for it, but it happens anyway. Now, I think it's especially bad in Helldivers because the developers play into the cult mentality. Not what's happening on the Discord, but what we have been seeing happening in the community. The doxing issue is just one of the recent examples of the crazy aspects of the Helldivers community, but we have like other examples in the past of very questionable behavior of the community. Don't get me wrong, most gaming communities nowadays seem to be very desperate cults, but certain ones stick out the most. I'm not even saying that Helldivers is quite unique, it's just that it's very, very specifically this incident sparked my interest here. And that's why I'm talking about Helldivers, but this could be a lot of online communities, especially in gaming, for some reason. I'm sure you can find very, very insightful studies on that phenomena. I mean, look at the Marathon subreddit currently. Like, once that game released, that is like what's happening on there, that is toxic positivity personified. Like, there is no place for criticism there. And these people twist themselves into pretzels. I mean, it's Reddit, you've seen this 100 times. It's like, oh my god, the game is so good. Oh my god, it has 80,000 players on release. It is so great. Everyone is just hating on the game. No negative opinion allowed. Delete every thread and comment that is negative. No different opinions allowed. I mean, this is typical Reddit, Now, you got devs that posture themselves as basically unfailable, better at completely untouchable geniuses, in short, cult leaders. And then you got this very heavily encouraged fantasy roleplay of a brotherhood of ultra-democratic soldiers, beset at all fronts, literally beset at all fronts. And then you got the aspect of the obvious social media bubbles and spaces like Reddit and Discord enabling in-group mentality, let's say it like this. And all of these probably contribute to why Helldivers is such a prominently bad example, or maybe a perfect example. If you want to maybe set up an online cult, maybe, take Helldivers as an example, and you got a cult. I think the LARPing is especially influential. The fact that Helldivers is set up exactly the way it is, that is why it worked out in the end. Like, this extreme loyalty that certain people display. Again, certain people, not everyone that is a part of the community is some insano mental case. When I think about this whole super democracy roleplay, I kind of always get reminded of the Wave experiment. If you don't know what that is, it's a book mostly. You read it in German schools because it's about fascism, and if you grow up in Germany, you get browbeaten with history about fascism, not just in history class, but basically in every class. So this is very much a required reading for everyone. And it's about a class setting up an experiment, basically replicating how in fascist societies, togetherness, brotherhood, and strong bonds were used to forge this in-group mentality, to forge people together so that they are following the party line with all sorts of activities, medals, signs, yada yada. They even set up their own hand sign. Either in the movie or the book, it's like the Wave hand sign. It's literally, you do something with your hand similar to how you do the same thing in Helldivers. You got a greeting, a sign of brotherhood, a sign of belonging. You do all activities together. You develop your own in-group dynamics and habits. And you only do so exclusively within that class, or in this book. It only exclusively happened within that one class of pupils. In the end, a lot of the students were so immersed in this LARPing that the experiment had to be forcefully shut down because it was too effective, thus basically proving that it is repeatable. You know, if you want to set up a cult following or some sort of fascist dictatorship, for example, it is easily done because it turns out that if you give human beings a sense of belonging in a community, they will very quickly do a lot of the things that you ask them to do. There's a film version of the whole thing, multiple film versions, of course, and we also watched that one in school. I'm pretty sure we even went to the cinema for that. This iteration is one of the more modernized versions of the movie. I don't know, it was like 15 years ago by this point in time. Basically, this one takes a few extra notes, doesn't really follow the book exactly, and has a pretty dark turn at the end, where there's basically this one kid in class that is the outsider, you know, teased and bullied by the others. Even within his own class, he's getting bullied. Now, as soon as the experiment starts, he's all of a sudden getting defended by his classmates. Former bullies, you know, they are becoming his friends because they are the wave now, you know, they are this conglomeration, they are a brotherhood. They are supposed to be united at all times for the sake of the experiment. Long story short, this kid is so fully immersed into the fantasy, since it's the first time that he's like any real friend group. When the experiment is cancelled in the end, he ends up shooting another kid and eventually shooting himself. There's a pretty dark ending, not exactly how the book went, but I think this illustrates one important thing. Within the Helldivers community, this behavior, you could call it, it's extremist behavior, you know, doxing someone over an online challenge is extreme. That is only done by some very few people, the same people who probably got a little bit too immersed in that cult. The absolute vast majority of people on the Reddit, on the Discord, within the community condemn these actions, and that is at least one positive thing to see. If there is a single takeaway from this incident, it is at least it seems that the majority of the community has their head screwed on correct and doesn't condone these types of actions. It is likely only those people within the community that have fully immersed themselves in that LARPing aspect and who actually fully believe every single word that the unfailable godlike developers are telling them. They have like this insane, mentally ill loyalty. Again, it's only a few, like 3% of the community, aka there has to be some sort of mental deficiency at work here, or there's at least some sort of mental illness at play. And the internet usually has its own way of exacerbating mental illnesses, so it makes sense that in a very cult-like community, you know, engaged or encouraged by the Arrowhead devs, it makes sense that if you act out these LARPing fantasies and you are also mentally ill, that you might be a little bit too immersed in the entire thing. And then you end up doxing someone over a simple charity challenge. There is always bound to be some people that take it too far, with this recent example. And while the Reddit or Discord is still absolutely infested with these types of people that immediately scream at you if you want to offer any form of criticism or post some irrelevant coping meme, I think besides the obvious reality that this is just Reddit, most people within the community and on Reddit and on Discord kind of have their heads screwed on correctly. You know, there might be Redditors, there might be Discord guys, but they're still probably mostly normal people. Well, I did see that apparently someone did burn a picture of Odo simply because he's critical of the game, but again, these people are outliers, they're not the norm. Now, what can be done about this? Well, shit, I don't know. I'm not a psychiatrist, man. And honestly, I just wanted to talk about this because I found it interesting. I don't really play Helldivers anymore. Haven't done so in about a year, so I'm kind of just an outsider looking in at this point. I don't really give a shit what the community is doing to itself anymore. But if I have to issue one simple tip, if you are one of the clear-headed Helldivers within the community, contribute to calling the bullshit out wherever you see it. And hold the devs accountable at every turn. Don't let them do shit to the community. Don't let them gaslight you, you know? And to the Arrowhead devs, maybe get off your high horse and maybe stop encouraging the extreme LARPing a little bit. You know, you have seen what happens to some members of your community if you play into the LARP too much. Maybe ease up on the mental illness, I guess. Don't encourage mentally ill people. Like, we don't need to enable these people any more than they're already emboldened by the fact that it's the internet. Anyway, that's all I wanted to talk about. See you next time.